The Belchertown State School for the Retarded sits in splendid isolation on an 800-acre tract of rolling hills and woodland in western Massachusetts. The setting resembles a picturesque New England college campus, but it does not prepare the visitor for what he finds inside. What he finds are 900 retarded children and adults living under conditions that have been described as shockingly oppressive, unsanitary, unhealthy, and degrading. Conditions that are an affront to human decency. The description of Belchertown comes from a class action suit filed against the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on behalf of the school's residents.
It was this suit that prompted us to visit Belchertown and see for ourselves how Massachusetts treats its retarded citizens. Citizens who are, in the words of a Belchertown psychologist, pretty much like the rest of us in that they need love. They get angry. They bleed.
Dr. Jones, how long have you been associated with the Belchertown State School?
I first came through Belchertown area last summer, and I then applied for a position as superintendent during the fall, and I was here off and on throughout the fall, and came on in November as superintendent.
Dr. Jones, a group called the Friends of Belchertown Association have filed a class action suit on behalf of the residents here, and they make specific allegations of conditions, different conditions in the institution. If you've seen the brief, are there any specific allegations with which you agree?
Well, I think that anyone who has come through the institution readily can see that there are many conditions which have been cited continue, particularly those where the residents are crowded in quarters, there is no privacy, the health standards leave questions in terms of the quality of the care. The possibilities of making this a human experience for the retarded, you could break it down into innumerable things that one would disagree with. I may respond to the Friends suit to this end, and that I believe that there is need for this kind of action to help focus before the public, before lawmakers, the need for reordering of priorities. And until this type of situation, or crisis situation, has occurred, frequently those people who make decisions and those people who set priorities, whether fiscal or whatever, don't tend to look at you. They tend to leave you in isolation, and this has happened for the general layout of the Belchertown campus. It's removed from society, and society can quite readily absolve itself from direct responsibility for the quality of care for the residents who live here.
Mr. Knutson, the residents of this institution have brought charges against the Belchertown State School and against the state of Massachusetts on certain conditions here. For example, in the infirmary, it's been charged that this one elevator, on this elevator, dirty clothes are brought up in the elevator, food is brought up in the elevator. In fact, one of the employees over there told me that cakes come up uncovered. Is this true? That's very true, Brad.
Mrs. Ronda, what do you have there?
This here is ice cream.
And underneath that?
This must be the dessert, which could be anything from pudding or jello.
All of this is
Oh,
food.
no, this is all food, right. We have juice and milk and tea, and we have our diets behind.
Now, this is the same elevator that's used for clean and dirty laundry.
It is.
The same elevator that's used to transport residents.
Right.
Why is the elevator used for so many different purposes?
We have no other way of transferring anything, our children downstairs, or no other way of delivering food.
Mr. Knudsen, this is the hospital at the Belchertown State School, about 30 beds in this hospital, we understand. And the charge has been made in the lawsuit that many of the physicians are not fully licensed in the state of Massachusetts, and there actually is only one licensed physician on the ground. Is this true or false?
Yes, that's true, Brad. Again, I'd have to qualify my remarks. The physicians are not licensed in this country to practice, say, in a private practice situation. All physicians that come from a foreign country, for instance, have to do somewhat of a residency in this country, and before they get licensed for such a thing as a private practice or working in a general hospital. I've often wondered myself why it is that they're good enough to work with the mentally retarded, but maybe not good enough to work for me or my kids. You know? You want to go in and look around now? That's good.
Mr. Knudsen, there have been other charges. Many people who come here to the Belchertown State School are not only retarded, but they have loss of function in an arm or in a leg. The charge has been made that once they're here, it's become increasingly worse. Another charge that 50 orthopedic patients here could have been helped if there was sufficient medical attention as far as operations were performed, let's say, a few years back. Is this all true?
I think 50 is a conservative number. When you have no therapy such as physical therapy, whatnot, at an institution like this, and you get multiply handicapped people in, it's amazing that you can almost tell their age by the amount of physical deformity they get. In other words, the curvature of the spine or whatnot. And yes, we should have had such things as physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy here long ago. But all of these programs have only started within the last couple of months. I'm happy to say that they're good programs, what we've got now, but we need much more of them. We need to increase the level of staff in those programs. Now, when we talk about surgery, surgery should never have to be a part of this whole picture, because if you get the children young enough, before they start developing these functional handicaps, you should never have to perform surgery. In other words, the services such as physical therapy, whatnot, should take care of it in a prophylactic manner, if you know what I mean. But now we've reached the point where you see many of the children with the extreme tightness of limbs, deformities and whatnot, which the surgeries are only out now. And sometimes that doesn't do the job, you know?
Mr. Argolia, the hospital here at Belchertown State School is not accredited. In fact, the entire school is not accredited. Why is that, and does it hurt the institution?
We simply do not meet many of the staffing ratio and equipment standards set out by the Joint Commission, which accredits hospitals and schools for the retarded. Certainly it would help us if we were, in the sense that if we had more of these kinds of resources, we would be able to have a better school. The piece of paper itself of being accredited isn't significant as far as I'm concerned. It's what it means, what's behind it, that counts.
You mean if you could get accredited, you'd have the things that you need here?
Yes, we'd have many of them.
All right, now, if you had a retarded child, would you commit him or her to Belchertown State School?
That's an extremely difficult question to answer. I don't think any of us who are not parents of retarded children can fully understand what kinds of anxieties and problems that these children can bring into a family. Families that I've seen have undergone tremendous amounts of mental anguish to the point where it was the family or individuals within that family or the child. One or the other was going to break. And I guess if I was faced with that kind of a situation, I might be forced to save myself or my wife or my family to commit my child to an institution such as Belchertown, but it would certainly kill me to do so.
Dr. Ritchie, you are a professor at the University of Massachusetts. You teach a highly specialized field of science. You're also the father of one of the residents here at Belchertown State School, and you're in the forefront of a lawsuit that was filed against the school and the state. Doctor, how long has your son been here at Belchertown State?
This is his 19th year at Belchertown.
Up until, let's say, the 18th year, the 17-and-a-half-year point, had you been unaware of the things that finally prompted the suit?
Well, I can't say I was unaware. I was aware of many injustices and dehumanizing situations. But to be frank with you, I was part of the problem.
What do you mean?
I trusted in the bureaucracy, and so I decided that one cannot remain part of the problem, one must be part of the solution to the problem, and therefore the reason for our change in posture and attitude. So we think we're on the road now to some progress. This particular building that we're in represents an attempt by the Friends, our organization, to fund programs which will, or fund projects which will humanize the environment.
Just what is that project?
The project is to reconstruct the interior of this building that we're in order to provide an environment which is suitable for human beings. Basically, that's our project, that's our intent. And we are doing this through private funding. This is not state money, it's money which we have solicited, so that we're looking forward to its completion.
What are some of the conditions to which you object?
Well, this particular room is rather interesting. This is a shower. We're standing right here near the shower, and this serves 15 people. It's not in very good condition, as one can see. It merely drips water. And people come in and just rush through it, and this is called showering. It's an affront to mankind, to all of us. It's something we should eradicate, and we're going to. Here's another example. The toilets without toilet seats, the lack of partitions between toilets, the proximity of these toilets to the shower head, single shower head, the scale on the wall, the general miserable, cruel conditions which undergird our whole suit, which is that we have been alleging and still allege cruel and inhumane treatment to human beings.
Now, Doctor, this building was erected 50 years ago. Would you say that the toilet, this whole room, is 50 years old also? Has it changed at all in 50 years?
No, it hasn't changed in 50 years. We're still operating upon a blueprint of failure, and we must change that blueprint.
Mr. Knudsen, we're approaching now F building. John's been in there. Now, is this a typical residence here at Belchertown?
Yeah, this is typical of the large old dormitories that housed, at one time these housed about 150 residents. Now they're down to between 50 and 60, all of them. We've got 8 dormitories just like this functioning on the ground at this time. Yeah.
Mr. Knudsen, it's charged that during checks of the residents at night, entire wards are lit and residents are awakened several times a night. Is this true?
Well, at least one time a night. At least the lights go on. They do check the residents at 11 o'clock at night to see and take an accounting of them, if you will. Some of the wards do this by flashlight, and others have to turn on the lights. And other wards, as I understand, have night lights that are on all night, rather dim lights, that the people can come in and survey the situation and see the residents.
There's been a charge that food and feces particles have been found on the walls of the wards. Now, what about that?
It's very true. That's very true. It's not too bad to find them on the walls as long as it hasn't been there for a day or a week or whatever. Many of the residents are not toilet trained. Many of the residents do defecate in the middle of the floor or smear it on the walls. As sad as that may be, that happens. And the thing is that we can train these residents not to do this. They could be brought up to a functional level where they would be toilet trained. They could perform hygiene duties for themselves and could even dress themselves and things like that. That's the crime, not that the feces has been found, but that it doesn't need to be there in the first place.
Mr. Knudsen, cockroaches. It's been alleged that cockroaches have been a constant problem, and in the recent past they've overrun some resident wards, resident buildings, to the extent where they've been found crawling over immobile residents. What about that?
I can't answer again yes or no. I would say that given the set of circumstances out here, it wouldn't surprise me There again, what do you mean overrun? I don't know about that. I think if I could, I'm going to give a horrible answer to that question, in the fact that if a resident is sitting on the floor for 14 hours a day with nothing to do, how terrible it is that he might welcome a cockroach walking across his leg as a diversity.
Mr. Knudsen, we're standing in the kitchen. Is this kitchen sanitary?
Well, outwardly, I can't say yes or no, but I don't know that I'd want to eat in here, Brad. I don't know if you would either. I look at the floor, for instance, now, a floor of concrete, pockmarked as it is. It would seem to me that this is a very good haven for bacteria. Anything that would want to grow, food spilled on the floor, whatever. Much of the equipment, as you look around, and you see much of it is very antiquated. A floor drain right in the middle of the floor. The whole thing is a 50-year-old building that would need much renovation to bring it up to par of what you and I would consider to be even a minimum.
Another thing I noticed when I walked in was the odor. With the food cooking, there's just a terrible odor. Now, do you notice this?
Well, I'll have to admit, Brad, I'm somewhat institutionalized, I guess. I don't notice as much as I did when I first came. But I remember when I first came, the odor in just about every building would knock me over. And the odors in some of the buildings are worse than the others. This building happens to be fairly fortunate because the residents here function at a higher level. Most of them are toilet trained, whatnot. But when you get to some of the other buildings where the residents do function at a lower level, and you have this constant smell of urine, feces, and the strong pungent odor of the disinfectants they must use to try to take care of this, it's tremendous.
Mr. Knudsen, I understand the drain in this kitchen, I wonder if this is true or not, backs up 3 or 4 times a year with sewage, and is that true?
That's true. I don't know how many times a year. I'd say probably 3 or 4 times is probably a good conservative estimate. It does back up periodically, and sewage all over the kitchen floor out onto the dining room floor. It's one of those things. How do you tackle without this large mass of money that we need, this infusion of money that we need into this institution? You'd be interested to know, Brad, for instance, that in one building just like this, a couple of years ago, they did spend $125,000, which was spent mainly on plumbing and heating considerations. And you walk into the building, and it's the same 50-year-old building. They didn't do a thing for it. Many of us feel, you know, if they're going to have an institution, what they ought to do is plow it over and maybe start over again. I don't think this is feasible. So what we've got to try to do is just work to try to make this the absolutely best institution we can.
How is the food brought in here?
Yeah, the food is all prepared in a central kitchen, Brad, and it's brought into all the buildings in these containers, if you will, in bulk. And then they are taken out of these containers and put on steam tables to keep hot, supposedly. And then at a later time, of course, they are served on plates to the residents. But all the food is prepared in a central area. When you take a building like this and you figure that, well, if we can house 45 residents in a building like this comfortably, why couldn't we have stoves? And why couldn't they prepare their food here in these kitchens and have fresh served food? I'll expand on this a little bit because we did manage to start a summer camp this summer. Many of the residents got a chance to go to a summer camp this summer for the first time. And I was amazed that the most often heard remark that I heard at the camp was how good the food is. Many of the residents had not tasted food that didn't come off a steam table before, and it was prepared fresh, and they thought that was great. They had much more food than they could ever eat, except they ate it.
I understand that many employees, when they first come to work at the Belchertown State School, have become quite ill with colds, with chronic diarrhea and the like. Is this true?
It seems to be true. It seems to be a pattern. I did. When I first came for, I would say for a 2-month period, I seemed to have a constantly upset stomachs and diarrhea and colds, easily susceptible to colds. There again, I don't know that this is all that much different than any other institution. I think there's some bacteria that is floating around here that most of the residents have had it before, and it stays here, and a new person comes in and gets exposed, much like going to a foreign country, if you will, and getting some of the diseases specific to a foreign country.
How old is the Belchertown State School?
Belchertown this year, Brad, is 50 years old. They started in one small building down on the farm, and I believe the title of it was the Belchertown Farm Colony for the Feeble-Minded.
Mr. Regalia, the farm area that we're looking at, where the Belchertown State School started out, serves only to lend to the atmosphere of scenic beauty here. But there is a matter of the lawsuit which contends there are a lot of things that are wrong here. One of the things that is charged is that there are no activity schedules on the wards, and that residents here at Belchertown State School regress once they've entered. Is that true?
I would say it's certainly true in some of the cases that residents regress. It's understandable in the sense that people come here needing an awful lot of attention, and in most cases we just simply cannot provide the amount of attention that they need, therefore they regress.
Another allegation is that residents are scratched and bruised and suffer from other injuries. Now, what about that?
That's certainly true. Residents here get scratched and bruised and injured from many kinds of different incidents. Most prevalent being abuse of themselves or one resident abusing another. And this is to be expected, I would say, in a situation where we have people crowded together as they are and where we don't have enough activity for them, alternative activities. So they turn to this kind of behavior. I know of very, very few incidents where an employee has inflicted an injury on a resident, and if they do so, it would be in an accident where they might, for example, be breaking in to break up a fight between two residents. Now, I'd also add that employees here are constantly getting injured and hurt, some of them to the point where they have to be out of work by the residents, either in an unprovoked kind of attack that a resident might just charge an employee, or in the act of trying to break up residents who are fighting.
Well, behind us here is K Building, where the older males profoundly retarded are. I wonder if we head toward there. Okay.
This is a building where many of the conditions that we were just talking about are prevalent. The residents are extremely difficult to handle. There aren't enough activities to keep them occupied. There tends to be a high amount of abuse of self and others on the part of the residents, and employees also bear the brunt of injuries as a result of these conditions.
Mr. Regalia, what you say is all well and good, but there are specific charges in the suit. Excessive use of chemical and physical restraint, and punishment bordering on cruelty and having little relationship to the gravity of the offense. Now, what about that?
I feel that these are situations which we have been trying to address ourselves for at least the 2 years that I've been here.
All right, now, has there been any truth to that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. I might add, however, that this institution has the lowest use of chemical restraint of any institution in the state, according to statewide statistics. I'm one who would be willing to admit that it's still not good enough, that we should seek alternatives, that being activity and behavioral kinds of alternatives to prevent the use of these kinds of last resorts, which we feel they clearly are.
You mentioned last resort. There's a boy in Ward 2 of Building G who constantly wears a fencing mask.
Yes.
Now, why is that?
This resident bites off ears, literally bites off ears. The behavior is almost uncontrollable. He's in need of a one-to-one kind of relationship with somebody, A, to watch him and prevent injury to others, because others do have rights to be protected, and B, to try to work with the behavior. We just don't have enough staff to provide a one-to-one to this individual.
Mr. Regalia, Benjamin Ritchie's son is a resident here, and he's been sexually assaulted. Is homosexuality rampant here at Belchertown State School?
According to the clinical definition of homosexuality, my answer is no. But the acts already do occur here. Sexual tension has to be relieved in some way, and when residents cannot relieve them, heterosexually, it's got to be relieved in some way. So homosexuality is a natural. However, we have found with residents who we put into the community, when faced with the choice of having sexual relations with a male or a female, that they, if they're a male, choose a female, and a female would choose to have relations with a male.
Does that mean that homosexuality, being almost unavoidable, is tacitly approved here?
No, we try to break up partners if we know of them, and our staff takes steps towards trying just to eliminate it if we can. We have a sex education program going on now within the institution with our more capable residents, and we're still searching for ways to try to explain the same kinds of things to our profoundly retarded residents.
Well, the suit mentions nudity, and in our going around the school, the different areas, we've seen several residents nude. Now, the question is, why are they allowed to go nude?
Many of our residents have adopted the behavior of not keeping their clothes on, of actually throwing them off once dressed. So some of them succeed and win over the staff's efforts to try to keep them dressed. Maybe if we had some more people, we could keep them dressed all day and try to break that pattern of behavior.
Mrs. Sweetak, how many men are in this ward?
Right now there are 56 in here.
How many attendants actually do you have working in this ward?
At this point, because it's 1 shower, just one. Usually we have 2.
How do you stand the smell?
It really is a big improvement since we used to have 150 in here.
150 in this room?
This building, they used the day hall downstairs. They divided them in half. We had 150
You mean
residents.
you say the smell was worse then?
It's been painted and we've improved greatly.
Can the men ever get out of here?
I'm not sure, but I doubt that they're ever going to progress enough to go anywhere. A lot of these people came in as little children, probably 3 years old, and have been from one building to another building to this stage. Some have improved, and at a certain stage, I think they all regress.
What about the state of Massachusetts? I mean, do they care? Does the administration in the state care?
You know, that's a good question, Brad. I really wish in my own mind I could say yes, but I've got grave reservations. I think if they could come down and spend some time and live with the situation a little bit, they would have to react. They would have to respond. But there again, the only other way is that people themselves have got to be aware of conditions. They've got to be aware of this, and then they'll make the state respond, I hope.
Well, Senator Edward Kennedy is supposed to be quite interested in mental retardation. A member of his family is mentally
Isn't that
retarded.
the truth? I've often wanted to say, Senator Ted, where are you?
Have the governor or state legislators visited Belchertown State School?
The governor was here in June, and in a statement that he made to the press, found conditions appalling. The legislators have been out here time and time again. There's a legislative commission investigating Belchertown State School and Monson State Hospital. They, too, have made much of the same kinds of statements and have written a report which, I'm not sure this is a quote, but said that Belchertown is a monumental disaster. And we're still here.
Mr. Regressive, investigation after investigation have produced the very same results, to wit, conditions at Belchertown State School are deplorable, and yet things go on as they are. Why?
The answer to that is not easy, and it runs right into the very fabric of our society, I feel. You and I and 180 million other people tolerate those conditions. Our society has always focused in on differences between people. You are different from me. A retarded person is different from me because I'm normal, when in fact we should be focusing in on the similarities between people. The residents at Belchertown State School are more similar to you and I than they are dissimilar. And they have the same needs. They need love. They get angry. They bleed. We must begin to emphasize that. And when people can see them as human beings, not as sub-human beings, but as human beings, I think it'll be a little bit more difficult for them to tolerate the existence of such conditions.
One of the big eye-openers that I had was making a trip down to Mansfield, Connecticut, and going on a tour of that institution, and I kept saying, you know, where are your profoundly retarded, where are your severe and profoundly retarded residents? I don't see them. And all the time, I guess I was seeing them, but they didn't look, they didn't act, they weren't our severe and profoundly retarded residents. There's an explanation for that. Connecticut has had a history of having excellent programs for the retarded, but we see down there the residents that very few of them aren't toilet trained, don't know some rudiments of basic hygiene, and can't help themselves to a certain level. So what it amounts to is it really takes less help, less staff down there to take care of the retarded than it does here. If you will, if we could do the same thing in Massachusetts for a few years, yeah, we could maybe visualize it as an investment, that we would end up with individuals that would be able to be happier and function at a much higher level, which in the long run would help us, would cost less money than what it's costing now.
G building, which houses some of the profoundly retarded here at the Belchertown State School, was built in 1964. This is a modern building. Isn't this adequate?
Very modern building, yes. And this building was built for, quote, the farm boys. Those boys that worked down on the farm were very capable residents, and there were quite a few of them. As you know, the farm has been phased out now. The building is so completely inadequate to serve a different class of resident. In other words, a lower functioning resident. As you know, the boy that fell out of the building, out of the window in that building, the windows in the building are all built about waist height, for instance. Now, if you were going to build a building for the retarded, the windows would be up out of reach where a resident wouldn't go out them, right? And you take a look at this nice new building with wide hallways and whatnot, and for some reason they put the damn thing in a hole. They put 7 stairs leading down to the building and then one nice little step leading up to the front door on this. Now, could they not have thought forward ahead enough to think that they might want to house multiply handicapped residents in that building? Now, how are you going to get wheelchairs in that building? So we could house multiply handicapped in there, but the stairs preclude that now.
Mr. Spiegel, would you please call me Larry? Okay, Larry. Larry, where are we?
This is G building, the adolescent living and learning unit.
Now, what's this on right here where we are, around the fireplace?
In this area right here, this is the intensive care unit, which consists of the 12 children who have the most potential to get out of this building, be it into a higher adolescent unit or into the community, a sheltered workshop or a rehab center, etc.
How many residents do you have in G building?
There are approximately 120 residents, and by sex, the breakdown is 70 males and 50 females.
How are they placed in this building, Larry, by IQ? Just how does it work?
We've thrown out IQ. What we did instead was set up our own criteria for getting into this building, and it varied. There are 2 adolescent units. This is the lower functioning of the 2. The criteria, automatic criteria for getting in here was any resident between the ages of 12 and 25 who had an ambulatory problem, a dressing problem, a toileting problem, a feeding problem. Automatically, you're in this building. And there were a few other criteria for borderline cases between this unit and the higher unit, and that dealt with the academic level the child was at, whether or not he was communicating at a high or low level, and his interaction was at low or high.
How about Ward 2?
Ward 2 is the male ward, which houses 30 residents. It is the lower functioning ward, probably the lowest functioning ward on the ground. The children in there vary as far as their functioning ability goes, for children that are slightly toilet trained to children that are not toilet trained at all. A great number of the children in that room are violent, not all at once, not necessarily towards one another, possibly towards themselves, possibly destructive towards valuable property, like putting their hand through a window or throwing a chair across the room. I'd like to meet Brad. Brad, I'd like to meet Phil.
Hi. Phil, how are you? Okay. This is incredible. How, just what is wrong with these residents? Are they profoundly retarded? Or?
These are the most severely retarded in the adolescent bracket on the ground. There are, in here right now, there are about 30 kids. Right now, we have 2 attendants on duty.
How much time do you spend inside this ward, Phil?
Well, in the day shift will be maybe 7 hours out of the 8 hours of the day.
How do you feel? I mean, my God, it must...
Well, you learn to accept a lot of things. You learn to see things that in any other circumstance you would just, do something about it. And here you can't because there's nothing you can do.
You mean to tell me that the state of Massachusetts can't do anything about this?
Look what they're doing. This is it. This is their ward. This is where they spend 24 hours a day, these kids, in this one room.
But the smell, doesn't that bother you?
Well, I get used to it.
Is there any help? I mean, if there was enough staff, could these kids be helped?
Sure. Well, right now there's 2 of us on the ward. There's normally 4, but 15 kids per attendant. And these kids are severely retarded. All you can do is stand in the background, and when you see someone either abusing someone else or there's messes to clean up.
They're not toilet trained?
Well, some of them are, some of them aren't.
Are they violent?
Some are, yeah.
How much do they pay you, Phil?
$116 a week.
$116 a week is all you make?
Yes.
And you're inside here approximately 8 hours a day?
Well, 7 hours, yeah.
Why do you do it?
Well, you got to be able to do what you can do, and that's it. You can only go as far as, that you just, while you're here, you just do what you can, and that's all.
What is your back?
Until you finally get fed up, until you just, then you quit. Or then you become another type of attendant in another building.
What is your background?
I have no formal background in this field at all. I just, wanted to work here.
I mean, where did you go to school?
Well, I went to school in Boston for 2 years at Northeastern, but decided that I'd rather be, I didn't come here for this reason, but I really have no formal background in retardation. Just the fact that I want to work.
Phil, let me ask you this. Do you feel, honestly, if there was enough staff, if this state cared, that these kids in this ward could be helped?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I mean, they wouldn't be sitting in their own urine then.
That's right. And you can imagine, though, just take these kids, just being in this ward, 30 kids, without the attention that they need, they get emotionally sick, too, as well as mentally retarded. This boy in the straight jacket over there has been in the grounds for 2 years, and he has just gone downhill.
That's the one in the straight jacket?
Yeah. He's been here 2 years, and it's just done. You can imagine living in this place 24 hours a day, and not, 2 attendants, so there's no any communication, there's no home life. This is their home. Each one of them sleeps in a different bed practically every day.
I can't believe it. And day after day it's like this?
Day after day.
What kind of an attendant is Phil Terrence?
He's a good attendant, excellent attendant. If everyone was like Phil Terrence, and most of them are, well, you just try to keep Phil Terrence's here. And I know in the long run that Phil Terrence will leave as well as all the other good attendants or good numbers.
Why will Phil Terrence leave?
Because it's an impossible situation and that is very simple. What can you do? You come in with hopes, you lose them here over time. What can two people possibly do with 40 or 30 children? You can stop them from beating up on one another. Yes, you can try toileting them. Yes, you can try feeding them. Yes, you can try keeping them dressed. But day after day, and watching kids deteriorate just blows your mind. And this is why we want extra positions. We want to keep the good people, and most of them really are, and we want to do more for those kids. And we know we can do. That's the worst part about it.
Do you think some of those kids in Ward 2 are going to make it?
Well, what do you mean when you say make it?
I mean, will they ever get out of there? I mean, that's their existence now right inside that ward.
We've already had kids that have made it out of Ward 2, into Ward 1, out of this building into the higher adolescent unit. Now, most of them will not make it, but there are a few that can certainly make it into Ward 1, possibly a few from there that can make it down here into the intensive care unit. Possibly a few can go out from there.
Should there be an intensive care unit on all these levels?
You better believe it. But this is what the state gives us, and this is what we have to work with. This intensive care unit is set up without using any attendants. What we have instead is 2 crash attendants who come through a separate department who are specially trained attendants. In addition to that, we rely on a number of people from the various colleges in the area.
Larry, what gets me in this whole building, especially in Ward 2, is the odor, the smell. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It gets me also.
I mean, you just can't capture this on film, but it's, my God.
You almost become immune to the smell after a while. You have to. You'll go crazy if you don't. But it's no one's fault. It's just that, we're constantly cleaning, but what can you do when you don't have enough attendants to set up a toileting program? That's the whole problem.
You don't have enough attendants?
No, we do not.
To set up a toileting program?
No, we don't. With the extra positions we got, what we're going to try and do is break that ward up into 2. I think this will solve part of the problem. It'll at least keep some of the kids from regressing even further. With the children that aren't toilet trained, we can then possibly start something. But again, we need supervisory staff, we need a psychologist to set up the programs.
Larry, let me ask you something. Can a youngster come in here at a certain level, and because of the conditions, because of the lack of staff, can he regress? Can he go down? Can he become worse than he was when he came in?
Oh, yeah. This is true. This has happened. This is reality. At Belchertown.
Well, what do?
You go crazy. You fight. That's all you can do. And sometimes you fight with the wrong people because the right people aren't around to fight with.
How about your staff? How about the LPNs? Are they good workers?
The LPNs are good workers, and the attendants are excellent workers. Actually, they're both excellent. The RNs are excellent. It's not the fault, really, of anyone in the building. It's the fault of we have too few positions.
Larry, if you could sum it all up, what do you really need?
We could use more speech therapists. We could use a lot more programming in the building. For that matter, the whole grounds could use it. It's not just G building. We could use more psychologists, more crash attendants, more social workers, possibly changing the role of certain of these workers because we had more people. We could do more things. You name it, we could use it.
Mr. Argolia, why is this institution called a school?
It's a good question. From what we've seen here, it really isn't a school in the sense that a school is a place where we educate people. And I wouldn't like to think that what we're teaching people here, for the most part anyway, is something that we would attribute to a school. This is a residential institution for the retarded as far as I'm concerned. But the state has made a differentiation between mental institutions and institutions for the retarded. And the institutions for the retarded are called state schools, and the institutions for the mentally ill are called state hospitals.
Is there anything good going on here at Belchertown State School?
Very definitely. I think there are some very excellent programs which demonstrate what we can do when given the proper resources. For example, the area that we're in right now is part of the vocational rehabilitation unit at the school. The residents who are now living in this unit each have a room of their own. This room is one of the residents' room who lives in this unit, and are bound for the community. This is the last stop in the institution before going out to the community. Here, we're sitting here, it's relatively quiet. If we were to go into a building at this time, the noise level would certainly be intolerable.
Hi.
family will enjoy. There's real excitement in Jim's electromagnetic torpedo attack. The call swings over the bullhorn. Man, the enemy is in target. All stations ready. Now load your torpedoes and attack. You fire, and it's a direct hit.
Privacy is so essential to one's own self-perception, of being able to get away, of being able to identify yourself with something, that it's a basic ingredient in life, and it's present nowhere in this institution except for the cottages, which only house 100 of our 950 residents. We have a relatively new but very good physical therapy department. We have a good occupational therapy department. I could go on. Our speech and hearing center is utterly fantastic. All of these programs, however, and many more which I haven't even mentioned, are what I consider to be token, in the sense that what we have is good, but there are so many people who need occupational therapy, there are so many people who need physical therapy, and we only have so many physical therapists and occupational therapists and speech therapists. So that to talk about what we've got it somehow leaves me unsatisfied. We need much more what we've got. Program efforts that we do have are the crash program, where people are trained and work with residents in small groups, our vocational training programs and so on. They only can deal with the number of people in small groups, because this is the way it has to be, that they have staff for. So if you want to keep a ratio at 1 to 10 in a small classroom, then you can only serve so many people. You're limited by the number of teachers that you have, and the number of crash therapists and activity therapists that you have. So we can't reach everybody in an individual kind of way, and thus their development is hampered, and we're not doing a thing for them.
What are some of the reasons that people are committed to Belchertown State School?
The laws recently were changed, and even the new laws, which are a lot more progressive, still discriminate, if you will, against the retarded. Now, I'll try to give you some of what the new law says, and then I'll go back and try to tell you some of the reasons why some of our residents were committed in the past. The new laws state that an individual can only be committed to an institution in this Commonwealth if he can be shown to be harmful to himself or to others. And it's rather clear how this would be applied, for example, to a person who is mentally ill and is showing suicidal tendencies or tendencies to harm others in society. But when it comes to the case of a retarded individual, it's not very clear that they're going to hurt themselves. They're not going to commit suicide, nor are they going to go out and kill somebody else or harm some other people. So we have to start to bend the law and think, well, we can say they're going to harm themselves in the sense that they're not going to be able to take care of themselves out in society. We had 1,600 residents in this very institution 5 years ago, and over 600 people have been placed out into the community. Many of them in competitive employment, working in a factory side by side with so-called normal people, living in an apartment. That clearly demonstrates to me that they didn't belong here in the first place, if in fact they can survive out there now. But the loose kinds of interpretations placed on the law, and the fact that society really didn't know what to do with these people. They were dumped here rather indiscriminately.
I've seen some fairly young children walking around here, some who are, well, they look very young, they're very small. How young are some of them when they're committed?
Right now, the policy which is in effect is that nobody can be committed to the institution under the age of 6. Previously, however, they could be committed at infancy, and very frequently this happened. This is obviously ridiculous because there's no reliable way in which intelligence can be assessed other than if there's some really gross physical deformity, which we should be very cautious about interpreting as mental retardation. But there's no reliable way of assessing intelligence of a 1-month-old child or even of a 1-year-old child. And to doom that child to a fate worse than death and put them in an institution from that age is criminal. There is no question that a child raised in a good home just can't be compared to a child who's raised in an institution. They can't compete. The institution does not allow them to get the kinds of interaction that they need with adult figures who are extremely important to children, to get the kinds of stimulation and independence they need. And so they're dying. They're dying. Their minds are dying.
How able are you to cope with an emergency situation, let's say like a fire in
In the infirmary?
A fire in the infirmary, I'm afraid, would be a disaster. There are no ways to get people in and out, such as fire escapes or chutes or anything like that. Most of the people in that area are multiply handicapped in wheelchairs. We just tried to make conditions a little safer by moving all of the people who are non-ambulatory, who cannot walk, to the first floor of the building and the other residents up on the second floor of the building. But still, with 200 some odd people living in that one building, a fire in there, I would really be afraid to see what would happen.
Are any state laws broken at this institution?
Well, I'd go as far as to say that we live with a double standard at the institution. If this were a private facility, the state would immediately close it down. But because we are a state facility, we are allowed to continue operation the way we are. It's a matter of money, Brad, and until the state acts, they've got to act strongly. If Belchertown is going to continue to be an institution and to house a certain number of residents, we've got to provide a minimum level of environmental factors that you and I would take for granted. All this is part of it. And the only way that the state is really going to act is if the people force this action. And the people, the general public out here that are watching this show have to become aware of these facts and have to become active advocates for the conditions as they see here today.
Dr. Jones, specifically, what don't you like about Belchertown State School?
I don't like any of the areas of the school, whether it's architectural design, living quarters, or health standards, which I think are in violation of a quality human living environment. If we were to go through these, to make the changes, to make the architectural changes that would allow people to have privacy, to allow them to really experience a human existence as you or I would want. I don't like the idea that we have to continue to make shift, to continue to do things, asking always extra, more and more and more of people. We have a tremendously dedicated and able group of people here who have given a tremendous contribution to care for the citizens who are here, the people who are trying to do a job here, who have to always live with the hope that something's going to get better when there still is an absence of funding, an absence of change in the architecture of the buildings, an absence of people to help them do the kind of job that they know they can do and that should be done. And that's deplorable.
You've let us see and film everything here at the school. Why? Why things are deplorable here? Why wasn't anything hidden?
The major hope I have is to, again, try to bring before the public the condition, to continue to demonstrate, to bring pressure upon the public to reorder its priorities for the care and the service that it has been in the past providing, which is basically an existence type of service for the resident. At the same time, I think it's important that the public realize that there is a future for the retarded citizen. We can demonstrate to you that we have programs which are beginning to deal with this future, with a hope for the retarded. The past treatment really denied opportunities for the resident, and the investment was being lost in the sense of the human potential of a retarded was turned. The general citizenry turned their backs on these people, and we're only now beginning to realize the tremendous waste of potential, plus the denial of just living opportunities for the retarded. So I wanted you to come in as a part of the campaign to help us re-educate the general public, also to help us bring continued pressure to demonstrate that we can, when given the opportunity, deal with the futures rather than the mere existence of a citizen.
The public has a responsibility. As a member of the public, and I'm part of the public, that created these places. By our silence, we have sinned. We've aided and abetted these places. And so this same public, people like you and me, and can solve this problem. And one of the ways to solve it, there are several ways I might suggest, and one of them is to visit Belchertown. Come to see this place. with its beautiful natural surrounding and its absolutely ugly physical surrounding. These buildings were built by people who had no regard for the warmth of a human being. So come to visit and see for yourself. And then after you visited and had your senses assaulted by the sights and the sounds and the smells, retire to the comfort of your living room and imagine yourself, your son or daughter, your grandchildren, and perhaps even yourself, in that kind of a brutal, dehumanizing environment. And then we'll see change.
In one of the buildings at Belchertown, there's an old-fashioned merry-go-round. It isn't exactly something you'd expect to find, but it's there to make life a little more pleasant for the younger residents of this unpleasant place. The merry-go-round is nice enough, but it's also a reminder that the pursuit of change at Belchertown, the attempts to rouse the public and to trouble the conscience of the Commonwealth, are all too often more like a merry-go-round ride than anything else. You go round and round without really getting anywhere.